Hello.
Hello, Andy.
Um, so in Las Vegas in June, I think a lot of what we want to talk about is trust. So could you talk a little bit about trust, why it matters, and what goes on in your head really to establish trust?
Right, there's a couple interesting questions there. One is why we ever trust strangers. The standard view in biology is I should only trust people I have a relationship with, who I'm going to see again. But we find in experiments and in data from every country in the world is that humans default into trust. So we tend to trust people around us. And when they don't fulfill that, then we stop trusting them. And so my lab identified the neurologic substrates of that system that says, hey, you seem like someone I can work with, someone that I can interact with in a trustful, safe, reliable way. And by knowing the mechanisms, we know what promotes or inhibits that response. And so I think the first couple takeaways are we default to trust almost always, or unless I'm coming in with a knife at you or something, and obviously you're not going to trust me. So that's a good thing. It also one reason why we tend to easily interact with strangers, which most animals do not, right? So, Andy looks like a fine guy. I can work with him. I can talk to him. I can do a deal with him. But some of the interesting factors that inhibit trust are competition. Testosterone actually kind of shuts down this pathway, not completely, it's continuous. And so if I'm in a very competitive industry, if I'm in heavy industry, a lot of men who are muscled, high testosterone, I'm going to expect more conflict, more friction between those individuals because these mechanisms that will allow us to work effectively together are inhibited. So from a leadership perspective, this means I've got to learn how to manage those frictions, measure and manage those frictions, I would say, and also to facilitate the value of trust, which is a lubricant against those frictions that people will typically have.
Right. Right. Then I've heard a lot of people talk about the speed of trust. So high trust environments, it just gets faster and more efficient to
Sure,
do
we can
work.
shake hands, get things done, but the question is, how do we create a culture of trust? And so my research has uncovered 8 core components that are the foundations for trust at the organizational level that are influenceable by managers. And so by knowing what to look for and how to influence them, then you can increase trust and therefore get that benefit of greater cooperation, greater productivity. And by the way, greater job satisfaction. It's more fun to work with people you trust. You just do better work as opposed to someone who's going to stab you in the back.
Yeah, and I think to selfishly plug the conference in June. We'll be talking more about that at the
Yeah,
conference. Yeah,
absolutely. Show up.
how useful break. So, you mentioned competition there. So I see ambition in some managers that perhaps they don't want to be wrong or say the wrong thing, and therefore dialogue is different. I also see sometimes competing purposes at work. So competition isn't just physical, is it?
No, for sure. People have goals and they want to get ahead and get a promotion and get a raise. From a leadership perspective, we really want to focus that ambition on those activities that increase the value of the organization, not the individual manager's value. And so it's got to be clear about aligning incentives. If they're not aligned, then we need to have a talk with that ambitious manager about working for the good of the organization. Surely means the good of all the people, all the direct reports around them. Having said that, competition is very motivating, right? So we certainly want people to compete, to get better, to get recognized, to get raises. That's great, but it should be an inclusive competition. Hey, let's beat that other company that's trying to build something that we're also trying to build or compete on a bid. So in-group cooperation and out-group competition. So we need to, it's just a focusing issue, I think. As you said, sometimes from the safety perspective, if I don't feel comfortable talking to my manager because he or she has different goals, perhaps than I do or the rest of the organization does, then I think it's important that we have an ombudsman, someone else who can go and mediate that relationship. So I think particularly in the safety situation, uh, I'm in the zero error camp. I want zero, people getting hurt. And in that case, we've got to have in the sort of Toyota production system, I have to pull that and on. I have to be able to say, hey, we got to stop. This is not safe. So I
Yes.
guess in this dangerous sporting events that I do, there always is an opportunity to stop everybody if something is unsafe. And I think that's got to be rule one in any place where people can get hurt.
No, I agree. And it's a huge source of debate in the safety profession about whether or not we should even talk about zero and and how that all fits in. But I have used it to good effect, right? Because in the competition sort of space, what makes us stronger? How can we do more and better? How can we come up with, better ideas and collaborate more on such thing? And you mentioned sports. I'm a big Formula One fan. Now, when I watch Formula One, and I started watching it in the 70s, so it's changed a little bit.
Yeah.
But there was some scary things going on, both for people watching, marshals, drivers, teams, and so on and so forth. And they laid down the challenge of no more, this is done. And everybody said, we can't be safer than this. We're going to add weight, we're going to add inefficiencies. It's, all of these rules that are coming in are just going to grind the organization to a halt. But I think you'll find that the motorsport is still as fast as it ever was, if not faster, and a heck of a lot safer. So you don't compromise one for the other.
Yeah, because people have skills. So if you're a
Yeah.
skilled person, you can be safe at what you do. If you're not skilled, we have to have a conversation about additional training, but I think safety always is job one.
Yeah, no, I agree. I agree. And I think back to that alignment piece. What do we mean by that as an organization? What are the behaviors that contribute to that statement, that strap line, that whatever it is, and how do we embed that in the culture? It's not really a question in there, but yeah, I think it's
But it's a culture question. I think the
it's a
key issue
culture.
there is the word culture, right? We have to have a culture of safety. And that means open communication. Everyone's got to be supported in building a safe workplace. If you see something that's not safe and people disagree and think it is safe, it's okay. We want to have that. You have to open information flow. So a lot of things that build a high trust culture, I think, are also essential to building a safe culture. And then again, that's something we will talk about more in
Sure,
June.
sure. And again, another comment. I've never yet come across an organization that didn't already have all of the knowledge that it needs to execute its work efficiently, effectively, and safely. The issue is it okay to say I need something? Is it okay to say I have a problem? And what are the attitudes that we have to collaborating with each other to solve problems? High trust, reduce the friction, solve the problems. And if the company's made it very clear, look, safety comes at this point in our conversations, right? If it's low down, people don't focus on it and bad things happen. If it's high up, people will work out how to deliver that for you.
Yeah, I think a great example is when Paul O'Neill took over at Alcoa Aluminum.
Right.
This is in I guess, the late 90s. And he wanted every morning a safety report. How many people were injured? And he said, I want zero injuries. And early in his tenure as CEO, unfortunately, there was a young man in his early 20s who was killed on the job. He violated a safety rule. Do not enter a big piece of machinery and end up killing him. And they had to rethink signs, right? People are not reading signs. So what do?
Yeah.
We've got to put barriers. We've got to block things off. We've got to have alarms, right? There are ways to do this. What happened was Alcoa's productivity soared because he said the number one thing we do is create a safe workplace. Now, if a
Yeah.
safe workplace means I care about the employees and those employees tend to reciprocate. We're back to now human nature. You treat me nice, I'm going to treat you nice, right? So if you look at Alcoa stock under Paul O'Neill, I think it tripled in value because Alcoa became one of the most safe but also productive workplaces in heavy industry.
It is, and I love that you quote Paul O'Neill. I'm going to struggle to remember it all, but he said, obviously, his first shareholder meetings, I've had 3 months to think about what I'm going to do as CEO, and I'm going to focus on safety. And the shareholders were like, sell, sell, sell.
Yeah,
And
they weren't
then,
happy,
no, they
right?
weren't happy at all. It's like, I just don't get this guy. But, um, arguably we talk about psychological safety today and creating the environment for that. But he said, you you have to answer these questions positively. In every professional interaction you have, you're treated with dignity and respect.
Mhm.
Um, oh, what was the rest of it? That's so embarrassing. I'm just trying to do this recall
Off
now.
the top of your head. Yeah, we didn't prep for this.
Gonna
But I think
gonna
you made
edit
an
this.
important, if I can follow up on that, Andy, you made such an
Yep.
important point, which is before physical safety comes psychological safety. If I do not feel as an employee comfortable telling my supervisor, my colleagues, hey, this thing is unsafe, in my opinion, right? If I'm in a conflictual environment where I get screamed at for doing anything, why are you off the job? What are you talking to me for? Go back and, right? That's going to be an unsafe workplace because we haven't established the psychological safety. So one of the things I'll talk about in June is how do we measure that? I'm going to ask people every day, guys in heavy industry, I'm going to ask them how they feel. They're not going to even tell me. But now we have technology, right, that allows us to continuously and objectively measure psychological safety from the brain. And by having that, we can assess which parts of our business create psychological safety, which do not. And those are going to relate directly to physical safety.
I absolutely, and of course, again, we'll be sharing the QR code for people with the appropriate devices. So you
Right.
can download the app, and in real time, we will put you through experiences where you can measure your psychological safety, you can measure your immersion, your interest, and importantly, whether or not you're going to do something about the conversation we're having.
Exactly right. So we'll give you tools at the conference that you can use for free immediately.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I'm still, that's annoying me now, trying to quote Paul
Sorry.
O'Neill. No, no, not at all, not at all.
Yeah, I know.
Is
I'm so happy you love that story. I love it so much. And the coda to that is this is don't use this online, but when he became Treasury Secretary, very briefly,
Yeah,
I
and
think under
George Bush.
W. Bush, or no,
Yeah,
under Bush too, he wanted the same thing. He said, "Hey, I forget what he was Treasury Secretary. I want to report
yeah,
on how many people are sick, like
yeah,
just as a metric of are we a
yeah.
successful organization." In Alcoa, they got that done in a couple of days, and it took them 3 months in the government before they could actually generate that report. He's like, every morning at 8 a.m., I'm going to see how many people are out sick every day. Like, I want 3 months.
Yeah,
Within a year, he was gone. He's like, no, this is crap.
yeah, there's a beast. It's a beast.
It's a
Yeah.
beast.
One of the things is you are given everything you need to do your job in a way that adds meaning to your life.
Oh, love that.
It was great, and he was one. Years ago, I came across the video, and when he said meaning, I started looking at what is purpose, what is meaning, because I hear an awful lot of people accumulating material goods, job status, position, power, whatever it is. They're not happy. But and again, one of my favorite quotes: your purpose in life is to find your gift, but to get meaning, you have to give it away.
Oh, lovely.
So if I think, and it's one of the articles I posted on this because it's very near and dear to my heart. I've invested my life trying to help other people, and it feels really bad when people throw it back in your face and they don't want to talk to you because it's my
Right.
purpose. I'm trying to help. But when you're accepted and somebody says, yeah, we'd listen to your views and opinions, let's work constructively, and it doesn't matter the adaptation or the influence or whatever that goes on, that psychologically safe environment where it's okay to share ideas, not just problems, but ideas, is a very powerful thing. So I I believe that the safety profession, and I'd be interested in your views, and this is the reputation that we have as one of rules, checking, correcting. And, when I was at school and I was getting checked and corrected, it didn't feel very nice. It didn't feel like something I wanted to volunteer for or participate in, right? And it was never nice getting red crosses in the book. But I had a few. But, that that's the kind of reputation safety has, stifling creativity and innovation. So what if we were able to create, measure psychological safety, measure the immersion and experience, and then adjust it so that people were more engaging, more open to having a conversation? Everybody knows how to do the job. If we listen and create the environment, surely that's a path to creativity and innovation.
For sure. So what we've shown in my lab and other labs have shown is that once you gain mastery over a task, you sort of open up brain space to be creative, right? That's where innovation comes from. Innovation means we're going to make some mistakes.
Yeah.
We don't want catastrophic mistakes. And we've got to have an environment of psychological safety where if I make a mistake, again, small mistake, hopefully, and I learn something from it, that's seen as a positive, right? If I'm living in the never deviate from exactly what we do, then we'll always have average. We'll never get better. So it's kind of a weird thing in the industry safety world in which we want to be safe. We want to have this environment of conscientiousness and clarity, but at the same time, we need to empower people with the autonomy to make their own decisions on the job that can improve what we're doing. And so, yeah, accepting mistakes is interesting. I've worked with, for example, hospital groups that have endowed nurses with more autonomy to make medical decisions because they spend more time with patients than physicians do. And mistakes went down. Right? You think, well, this person's less trained. How can they? Well, they have more on the ground information. So, again, to me, that's creating a culture of understanding human beings, of care, of psychological safety, and the immersion part, which you mentioned, is like, do you actually care about what you're doing? Like, if you don't, you're not really going to do it well. And by the way, you're not going to be safe either. So, by measuring both immersion and psychological safety, we're getting in my environment where I can have autonomy, have control over what I do on the job, and talk to my supervisor. And the immersion part is, do I actually dig this job? Am I excited about this? When I wake up, do I have energy, or do I have to drink 14 cups of coffee just to get on the job site, right? So I want those people who are turned on and excited, and that's also a culture issue, right? I can take great people who are well-trained, who are experts in their jobs, and just beat the crap out of them psychologically, and they're not going to perform well. Conversely, I can take people who are maybe only so-so on the job, but I can create an environment where I kind of bring these people up. And I think that's what, from a leadership perspective, we should be doing, is cultivating individuals to reach their highest level of performance. And that requires knowing why we're doing what we're doing. That's purpose.
Yeah, I love that. And I think being a conduit to allow that to happen, it has to be a path to success. It has to, when we're trying to work out if we trust someone, for me, trust is a social risk assessment. If I give you this information, will I get help or will I get harm in return? So if you find fault with what somebody's doing against the standards that you imagine, and then you correct them to your standard without understanding the struggles that they have to overcome or the ideas that they have to make it better, it's like, you know what, you're here to fulfill your purpose, fill in your check sheet, go home, get your bonus because you've met your target or whatever. So, you don't belong to the same tribe as me. If, however, you ask the question, what do you see here that we could improve on? And somebody points at the the idea that they have to make it better. In one school of thought, it's a problem, and another school of thought, it's a solution. But if you then help that individual to be successful, networking in the organization, whatever it takes, you belong to the same tribe. I trust you. Next time you come back, I'm going to give you more information. I'm going to give you more information, and then we're going to share some ideas. And I think instead of the flat line compliance, you can uptick that with guided adaptation, with proper conversations, and so on and so forth, right?
And it's been done. I think one reason to, attend the conference we're talking about is because there are examples. I think of Ricardo Semler in Brazil, heavy industry, wrote a wonderful book called Mavericks, and just endow the employees to make as many decisions as possible. Don't talk to management. You guys organize, you're on the ground, you know what you're doing. And again, took a company that was going to go bankrupt and became very successful. And so, again, I'm not saying everyone needs to have a leaderless organization. I think we still need leaders. But on the other hand, I think we've got to create an environment where the people who have the most information have that chance to share the information and get better.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. And actually, in the Friday workshop, we're going to go through a case study in the Middle East. And whatever's in your head about the reputation for human rights and employment rights in the Middle East, we're not going to discuss, but I've now put that idea in your head. But against that sort of a backdrop and a huge number of, fatal accidents year on year on year on year, we operationalized trust. We broke down barriers. We found solutions to problems that previously there was only blame. But the needle moved up when people thought, oh, somebody is interested in what I have to say. They are interested in trusting me. They are interested in giving me some autonomy and some leeway. And we slowly took procedures out. We every time we saw the word control, we used the word enable. How does this control work? No, how does it enable work? And just those little phrases along the way, instead of corrective actions, we said, how do we do collective creative actions? And we changed the language in the company that then embedded, how can we be creative here? How can we be collective and collaborative, and how we make this better? The problems came anyway, but the focus on solutions just built performance over time.
And lovely. And we should say that we're talking about Impact 2024 in Las Vegas starting June 10th. We'll both be there presenting. You'll be presenting for many hours. I'll be presenting for an hour or so. And the goal is to give people tools to be more effective, both from a safety perspective, but really from an organizational perspective. How do we really flourish as organizations? And that means individuals also need to flourish.
Yeah. And I think the community wants to hear human and organization performance isn't a safety thing. It's a business thing.
Yeah, exactly right. It's creating value for the business. It's not a cost center, it's a revenue center.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Should we hit the stop button at that?
Sure. I think we have a lot of material. Gosh, yeah. Andy, you and I could talk for